And joining me now with more on U.S.-Russian relations is William Courtney, former U.S. ambassador to both Georgia and Kazakhstan. He was also a special assistant for Russia, Ukraine, and Eurasia during the Clinton administration. Welcome back to the show. A lot of news tonight, and first I'd like to get your thoughts on this proposed $1 billion U.S. military boost in Europe, and how do you think that announcement will affect U.S.-Russia relations?
Well, this is a sensible step by the United States. And so there are really two things going on. One, the U.S. will increase rotational military activity and training and some other things in the eastern edge of NATO. And secondly, NATO, the alliance, is agreeing to step up military training and cooperation with the Ukrainian military. So both of those are complementary steps. Neither of those is really a provocative step. In fact, those who criticize the steps say that really NATO should be providing, and the U.S. should be providing, a permanent, substantial military presence in Central and East Europe and its allies, such as Poland, the Baltics, Romania, Bulgaria, because Russia violated a 1997 understanding by which NATO and Russia agreed that NATO would not put those deployments in Central and Eastern Europe if the current strategic environment stayed the same. But it's changed.
Well, and Russia obviously feels differently because there are reports that Russia is also now reorganizing its troops and its mobility in exchange or because of what NATO is doing. How dangerous is that overall?
I don't think it's that dangerous. After Russia invaded Georgia in 2008, Russian forces didn't perform very well, even though they were able to overwhelm small Georgia. So Russia started investing a lot more money in its forces, including its special forces, if you will, special operations forces. And so now they're in much better shape than they were before. But Russian forces still are full of conscripts that are ill-trained and not well motivated. So I think Russia is actually scared to invade and occupy eastern Ukraine because those are not areas where there are majority ethnic Russians.
Well, you know, you have U.S. President Barack Obama being at the same place this week with Russian President Vladimir Putin. They're supposed to meet separately with Francois Hollande, the president of France. Do you think they will meet on the sidelines at some point and have any kind of dialogue?
It's kind of hard to predict that, but the issue would be, what would they say? There are sanctions against Russia by European countries and America because of what Russia's done in Ukraine. Those sanctions may be increased. There's no agreement to do that yet. But if Russia continues stoking aggression in eastern Ukraine, that's likely. For example, recently, there was an anti-terrorist activity in Ukraine that killed 30 separatists. Those separatists weren't buried in Ukraine. They were sent home to Russia to be buried. It's really the Russians who are stoking those fires in eastern Ukraine. As long as that's happening, there could be more sanctions.
But don't you think that's a good opportunity? There, you have two world leaders at the center of what's happening in Ukraine. Don't you think that they can work something out?
No, if interests are opposite, they can't. It's a wasted opportunity, actually, because if you have a meeting like that and nothing happens, then it looks as if they've both failed. There's no reason for President Obama to take that kind of risk now, unless he believes something productive can come from a meeting.
You know, the U.S. president is also calling for Putin to meet Ukraine's newly elected president. What are the chances of that taking place?
Well, I suspect that President Poroshenko would be willing to do that. And certainly it's important for there to be better relations between Ukraine and Russia. That's hard as long as Russia's engaged in aggression against eastern Ukraine, as well as occupying Crimea. But Ukraine and Russia are going to be neighbors forever. They're both large countries. Ukraine is independent in between Europe and Russia, and so there are a lot of economic relationships in which all of those have some substantial tie for them. So I think that would be an important activity to take place.
All right, Ambassador William Courtney, we appreciate your insight. Thank you so much for joining us.
You're quite welcome.